Okay, so in this step we are going to look at creating the RFQ, the request for quotation in D365 for finance and operation. So I'll go to within procurement and sourcing, and you can see here we have purchase requisitions. I'm sorry, request for quotations. So here we can either create a request for quotation manually. So we'll do that. You can actually also create a RFQ from a purchase requisition itself. I can show you where. So let's just go to procurement and sourcing, and I'll open up all purchase requisitions. And you can see I can create a new purchase requisition, some computers, and say OK to that. And in this case, I will add a line, and I'll select my procurement categories. I have computers there, so you can see it can be an item. It can be a procurement or a category, right? So in this case, I'm just selecting a category. So buying 40 computers, and let's say putting initial price of 800, and go save. So you can see you actually have this new request for quotation, but it's grayed out for now. It's only once you actually submit the workflow then the request for quotation actually becomes available. So I'll submit now the workflow, and now you can see we have this request for quotation that came up, and now we can go ahead and select the legal entity that we want to use, and the purchase requisition, and then we say OK to that, and then you can see a request quotation with ID quadruple 020 has been created. Okay, so that's how you create it from a purchase requisition. Let's just leave that for that, and let's go back to our request for quotation list page, where we can create it manually also. As a third, I believe you can create a RFQ from a planned purchase order as well, but we won't cover that here. So let's go and create a RFQ from scratch here from our RFQ list page. So I'll select new, and you can see the purchase type is defaulting to purchase order, which is the default I set in the parameter setting. I can set a document title. Maybe we're looking at some photocopy machines. And you can see, because we left the solicitation type blank in the parameters, it's also blank here, so we'll actually have to select it, right? So let's say that we are looking for some goods, used to purchase goods here. So we'll add that. You can see the expiration date at time defaults to, right now we're in the 4th of March, and you can see it defaults to 30 days in advance from the date here. Okay, so we'll then select the warehouse, and site don't have to, you can leave it blank. Just gonna do that. Maybe just the site, don't need the warehouse. And then I'm saying OK. Okay, so that creates our request for quotation case number 00021. And you can see, just like on a purchase order and purchase requisition, you have a line view and you have a header view. Okay, so we're at the line view at the moment. So we're going to look at here. We have line type, can be an item or category. So you can select an item. If I want to select a procurement category, I have to select the category here. So I'm just going to select the procurement category. And I'll look at office machine again. Here I actually have photocopiers. You can see I have more options here than I had on my purchase requisition. And that's because in the purchase requisition I was using purchasing policies where there were some limitations on what categories that was exposed in the purchase requisition. I don't have that limitation here, so you can see I have more options. One of the options are photocopy machines here. So I'll select that, say okay. Select, let's say maybe I want the delivery date in end of April. Let's say we're looking for 20 of these, and they're expensive. Oh, that was the unit, not the price. Unit will be eaches, and price is 2,000 each. Oh, that's what we are expecting. Okay, so I'll hit save on that, and then we can go in and well, I set the delivery date actually here on the line level. I could have set it here on the header level, right? So let's just do that. Yeah, well, it doesn't really matter. It's the same date, but at least now they're adjusted. Okay, so let's go to the header level. So here on the header level, you can add things like buyer group. You can put a description here. This is a queue for additional photocopiers console. And then write a long, so big text field there you can write. And you can see the bidding guidance items are already now applied, and that's because I've added, remember we added those bidding guidance items to the solicitation type. If we hadn't, it wouldn't have defaulted here, right? We would have had to manually add those. And as you can see, we can also add more if we wanted to, right? So it's just defaulting from the solicitation type, but you have the option to add more. Same on the scoring criteria. Remember we had the scoring criteria associated with the solicitation type. So let's just view it quickly. So you have the scoring method here on the solicitation type, right? And so that is now being applied. When we look at scoring criteria up here, we can look at, we can see that we have the scoring criteria. Bear in mind that you can actually add to that, right? So you can add more if you wanted for this specific RFQ, maybe experience with vendor or something like that. Right? You can add 0 to 20 to 10 for that, for example, right? So you can add more on the scoring criteria if you wanted to on the RFQ itself, right? So now we come down to the vendor. So this is on the header side is where we select the vendors. So you can either use the vendor search form where you can search based on city, state, and country and all that, and looks like. And if you have some of the different diversity classifications set up on the vendor itself, you can then search on if it minority owned or female owned, if it's a small business, and so on, right? So you can set those criteria. Even from your procurement categories, you can go and look at the vendor evaluation criteria group and so on. Okay, so you can use this form to select your vendor. So if it's a specific region, you might want to just look for vendors in a certain state and so on, and it will bring up those vendors. Okay. Obviously, you have the option simply to select the vendors manually here. Okay. Then you also have this auto add vendors. So this auto add vendors actually look at your approved vendors in your procurement categories. So let's just take a look at that very quickly. So I'm just going to duplicate this tab. So go back to our procurement and sourcing here and go look at procurement categories. And here I'm going to find my procurement category that I was using with it, which is my photocopiers. And if I look at my vendors here, you can see I have 4 approved vendors. I've added those 4 approved vendors, right? So if you have already set approved vendors under your procurement categories, you can use that. Then it's very easy to simply hit the button Auto Add Vendors, and you can see it will fill out it will add those vendors on the fly there. Okay, so neat, but you can remove, you can add more, and you can remove as you need. So I'm just going to remove that, and then next here the amendments will come back to that. We have the notion of you can add questionnaires in the system. So well, questionnaires have been in the system for many years in D365 and AX before that, but you can apply it also. It's very helpful here in RFQ connection. So you have selected different questionnaires. You can then add a questionnaire and add that to the RFQ, for example. You can add documents, very important here. So I can go here and add my documents. If I want my vendors to see those documents, you can see I can just create a node. Maybe I'm just writing, this is a header level node. If you want them to see it, remember to put the restriction here to external. Otherwise, it's just going to be an internal look. And you can see I've done in this case, what I've done in this case, I've actually created a document type where I'm using my SharePoint location. So I'm just going to take here an old PDF file, and you can see there's a preview of that PDF file here, and I have to remember to set that as external for my vendors to look, so they can look at it. But what's interesting in this case is that I've added this one as a SharePoint side, so that document is also available on my SharePoint side, which, you know, if you could imagine you have a scenario where you want some external vendors to have access to a SharePoint site, or even have some external vendors access to a Teams site that you have created on your Microsoft Teams. Recall that Microsoft Teams actually uses SharePoint in the background to store its documents. So you could actually create a document type here. If I go and click on this document type, you can see that I'm using a location in SharePoint, and this is a SharePoint address that I'm using. And so you could create a folder in your Microsoft Teams, which basically is a SharePoint folder, and then allow, you can see I've created a folder that I've called RFQ bids, and that's where I'm sending those documents to. And then you could make that, you could create a team site for your external vendors and make that accessible to those vendors also. So in that way, you actually get a great collaboration tool connected with your RFQ processing here in D365, right? So that's just some food for thought there, what you can do with the document management and processing of these. So I will just close this one down, and we have you can see now we have it says 2 documents here, and then we are kind of ready to set it up. One more time that I want to look at, you can see these RFQ reply defaults. That was actually also on the parameters form. We didn't review that, but let's review it now here. So I'm just gonna look at set RFQ reply defaults. This is actually set on on the parameters before, but we didn't discuss it, so I'm gonna discuss it now. So it defaults from whatever we have set on the procurement parameters. But you can see here we can then say what are the different fields that vendors are allowed to adjust in their bid, right? So maybe we want to allow them to or maybe not allow them to put discounts on it, just the unit price and purchase, right? And maybe some vendor reference and so on, right? So we can put what are the fields that they should be allowed to put there. Maybe we do want them to put on what is their external item number there, an external item description. We want to allow them to put that on, and then we say okay to that. So those are then the fields that they can adjust and provide input on their bids. So that's basically it, and then from here we'll then go and say hit the send RFQ, and that will actually send that RFQ to our selected vendors that we have selected.